The sun had barely risen over Earth, casting a soft, golden light across the desolate landscape. The once vibrant cities now lay in ruins, their streets littered with debris from months of war. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was a sense of purpose in the air. The final battle was about to begin. The Zkarn had come with their full might, bringing their most fearsome weapons and their relentless soldiers. But what they hadn't counted on was humanity's ability to adapt, to fight, and to never give up. General Marcus Hayes stood at the front of the human forces, his eyes scanning the horizon. He had seen countless battles, but nothing like this. The alien forces had devastated cities, killed millions, and left the world in a state of constant fear. But now, with the last of humanity's resistance forces gathered in what remained of the major cities, the time had come to make their final stand. Behind him, soldiers prepared for the coming assault. There were no words exchanged. There was no need for speeches or motivation. Every soldier, every civilian who had taken up arms, understood the gravity of what was at stake. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about showing the invaders what humans were truly capable of. Marcus took a deep breath and turned toward his officers, giving them the signal to begin. The first wave of fighters took to the skies in their modified planes, equipped with alien technology scavenged from past battles. They were armed with powerful energy cannons and missiles that hummed with deadly power. They had no choice but to fight back with everything they had. The air crackled with energy as the human forces launched their assault, the sound of jets roaring and explosions echoing across the battlefield. The Zkarn retaliated almost immediately, their massive warships descending from the clouds. Their ships, sleek and dark, were armed with weapons that could turn entire cities to ash. But even as the first bombs fell, humanity refused to back down. The human soldiers, trained and determined, fought with an intensity that surprised even the Zkarn. The battlefield was a blur of fire, smoke, and flashing lights. Soldiers on the ground fought tooth and nail against the alien invaders, using every bit of technology they had learned to control. Buildings collapsed around them as explosions ripped through the streets. But the humans were relentless. They had adapted quickly to the Zkarn's tactics, turning their own weapons against them. In the midst of the chaos, General Hayes and his team of elite soldiers made their way toward the heart of the battle. They knew that if they could take out Relthor, the Zkarn leader, it would cripple the alien forces. The alien commander was the key to the invasion, and without him, the Zkarn would falter. It was a suicide mission, but there was no other choice. The fate of humanity depended on it. The human team moved through the ruins of the city, using the shadows to their advantage. They had learned to move undetected, blending in with the destroyed buildings and using the debris as cover. As they got closer to the Zkarn command center, the tension grew thicker. Every step could be their last. But they didn't flinch. They were determined to complete their mission, no matter the cost. When they reached the command center, the doors were heavily guarded by Zkarn warriors. The humans didn't hesitate. They stormed the building, guns blazing, fighting their way through the alien soldiers. The Zkarn were powerful, but they were not prepared for the fury of humanity. The humans fought with a desperation and savagery that made them nearly unstoppable. As they reached the inner sanctum of the command center, they found Relthor standing in front of a massive control panel, overseeing the final assault. The alien leader was imposing, his black armor gleaming in the dim light. He turned slowly as the humans burst in, his eyes narrowing as he studied them. "You think you can defeat me?" Relthor's voice was cold, his tone mocking. "Your species is nothing more than a fleeting moment in the grand scheme of the galaxy. You will fall, just like the others." But General Hayes wasn't intimidated. He stepped forward, his voice steady. "You underestimated us. You came here looking for weakness, but you found something far more dangerous." Relthor laughed, the sound echoing through the chamber. "Your stubbornness will be your undoing. Your kind is weak, driven by emotion. You cannot defeat us." With a swift motion, the alien leader activated a powerful force field around himself, his hand crackling with energy. The humans opened fire, but their weapons bounced off the shield. Relthor smiled, confident in his victory. He raised his hand, ready to strike down the humans, but then something unexpected happened. In that moment of arrogance, the human soldiers did something the Zkarn had never anticipated. They adapted. They had learned to fight in ways that the aliens couldn't predict, using their own technology against them. One of the soldiers, a young woman named Emily, hurled a device at Relthor's shield. The device emitted a pulse that scrambled the alien's energy field, creating a temporary weakness. The shield flickered. It was enough. General Hayes took the opportunity and charged, slamming his fist into the control panel, causing a massive explosion that rocked the command center. Relthor, caught off guard, was thrown back by the blast. He staggered to his feet, in rage. "You think you've won," he growled, but his voice lacked the confidence it once held. "Even if you defeat me, there are billions more of us. We will come again." But Hayes, with sweat dripping down his face and his heart pounding in his chest, took one final decisive step. "We'll be ready." With that, the humans unleashed everything they had. The remaining soldiers on the ground stormed the command center, overpowering the last of the Zkarn guards. Relthor, the mighty leader of the invaders, was finally brought to his knees. As he lay defeated, the human forces sealed the command center and broadcasted their victory to the world. The battle raged on, but the tide had turned. Humanity had shown that, no matter the odds, they would never surrender. The Zkarn had come to Earth seeking weakness, but what they found was a species that had learned to fight in ways they could never understand. Humanity had tapped into something primal, something instinctual, and now it was time for the aliens to understand the full power of what they had awakened. The war was far from over, but the Zkarn had learned a painful lesson. They would never underestimate humanity again. The final assault had shown them one thing. Humans were built to kill, but more than that, they were built to survive. And that was something no alien force, no matter how powerful, could ever defeat. As the final Zkarn ships retreated from Earth, leaving behind a world in ruins, humanity stood tall. They had survived. And now, they were ready for whatever came next. The Zkarn had arrived on Earth with their towering ships, their superior technology, and their endless arrogance. They believed their conquest would be quick and easy. After all, they had wiped out countless civilizations across the galaxy, and Earth was just another pitiful world ripe for the taking. But something about humans, something deep in their biology, began to trouble the invaders. As the first battles raged across Earth, the Zkarn were shocked to find the humans fought with an intensity and ingenuity that no other species had ever shown. They were weak physically compared to the aliens, but they fought with a tenacity that baffled the Zkarn. The humans adapted rapidly, turning the very weapons the aliens used against them. With every defeat, the humans learned more, growing stronger and more resourceful. It was unlike anything the Zkarn had experienced before. In the midst of the chaos, the Zkarn leaders began to wonder, what made humans so dangerous? They were small, fragile beings in comparison to the vast armies of the Zkarn. They had no advanced weapons or superior technology, yet they were holding their own. And in some cases, they were even pushing the alien forces back. There had to be something beneath the surface, a hidden strength that they had not yet uncovered. Relthor, the Zkarn's supreme commander, called for an immediate investigation. If the humans were so capable of resistance, there had to be a reason. The scientists on the Zkarn motherships began experimenting, conducting studies on captured humans in the hopes of uncovering the secret to their strange power. The first set of tests was simple enough. The Zkarn scientists observed how humans reacted to pain, fear, and stress. They noted how some individuals became almost frenzied when faced with extreme danger, while others seemed to lock into a calm, focused state. But what the Zkarn did not realize was that they were merely scratching the surface. The truth lay deeper within the human mind, and more shockingly, within their very DNA. As the Zkarn ran more experiments, they began to notice an odd pattern. When humans were pushed to the brink of death, when they faced annihilation or the loss of everything they cared about, something inside them triggered a shift in their very nature. A dormant instinct, buried deep within their biology, activated. The humans didn't just fight to survive. They fought with an overwhelming, almost unstoppable fury. They killed without hesitation. They became something else entirely, beasts driven by a need to destroy their enemies, a primal urge to protect their species at all costs. The Zkarn were stunned. The idea of such an ability was foreign to them. In their long history, they had never encountered a species whose survival instincts could trigger such a violent transformation. What the Zkarn had seen as an act of desperation was actually part of humanity's fundamental design. The humans, at their core, were built to kill, to fight and survive at all costs. Their biology was structured to adapt, to grow stronger, and to become deadlier when faced with an existential threat. Ralphor, shocked by this discovery, ordered a deeper investigation. His best scientists began extracting the genetic code of humans, studying their cellular structure and neurochemistry. The more they studied, the more they realized that humanity's incredible resilience wasn't just a matter of willpower. It was coded into their very genes. There was a mechanism within the human body that allowed them to tap into an ancient, almost primal form of strength, transforming them into a perfect weapon when provoked. The Zkarn had overlooked it at first, but now they saw it clearly. Humans were biologically engineered to destroy threats, to wipe out enemies, and to fight back with unmatched fury. This discovery was both terrifying and fascinating. The Zkarn had thought they could easily overpower humanity with their superior technology and weaponry, but now they faced a new challenge. They realized that defeating the humans wasn't just about brute force. They had to understand and neutralize this deadly instinct, or they would risk provoking it fully. The Zkarn leaders gathered for an emergency meeting. They discussed the findings and debated the next steps. Ralphor was furious. He had underestimated humanity. His arrogance had clouded his judgment. He knew that if they did not act quickly, the humans would adapt even more, pushing them back and possibly even defeating them. The Zkarn could not allow that to happen. Ralphor decided that the only way to truly defeat the humans was to break them, to destroy not just their cities, but their will to fight. He ordered a new wave of attacks, a relentless bombing campaign that would raze entire cities to the ground, killing millions and causing massive panic among the survivors. He believed that by creating a sense of hopelessness, he could stop the humans from fighting back. He would show them the true power of the Zkarn. But what Ralphor did not anticipate was the effect his strategy would have on the humans. Instead of breaking them, his brutal attacks only served to awaken something even more terrifying. As the cities burned, as families were torn apart, humans rallied together. The instinct to protect, to survive, to kill in order to preserve their species, surged to the forefront. It was as if the very destruction the Zkarn brought only fueled the human drive to resist. The more the Zkarn attacked, the more the humans learned. They took whatever they could from the wreckage of their cities. Alien technology, weapons, anything that could be used to strike back. Human ingenuity was like no other. They built weapons from scraps. They formed alliances, and they organized resistance groups that grew stronger with each passing day. The Zkarn had underestimated humanity's ability to survive, to learn, and to adapt. It became clear to the Zkarn that they had made a grave mistake. In their pursuit of dominance, they had ignored a crucial factor: the human spirit. No matter how many cities they destroyed, no matter how many people they killed, the humans never stopped fighting. They were relentless, and that relentless drive was powered by something that the Zkarn had never encountered before: the knowledge that they were fighting not just for survival, but for something greater. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the tide began to shift. The Zkarn realized that they could not defeat humanity with brute force alone. The human spirit, driven by a genetic instinct to fight, to protect, and to kill when necessary, was far more powerful than they had anticipated. The true nature of humanity had been revealed, not just as survivors, but as warriors capable of turning their greatest weaknesses into their most terrifying strengths. The war between the Zkarn and humanity had already cost countless lives, and yet the fighting only intensified. The alien forces, accustomed to crushing weaker species, now found themselves struggling against an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered. The humans, pushed to the brink of extinction, were rising. With every defeat, they were learning, adapting, and growing stronger. The Zkarn thought they had humanity cornered, but in reality, they were making a grave mistake by underestimating the true depth of human resilience. In the aftermath of the brutal attacks on Earth's major cities, human forces began to regroup. What remained of Earth's military and resistance groups formed an underground network, using the wreckage of their fallen cities as shelter and their alien tech as tools. People who had never held a weapon before now found themselves trained in the art of combat. Civilians turned into soldiers, scientists became engineers of war, and even the most peaceful individuals were forced to fight. Humanity had no choice. They either adapted or they perished. General Marcus Hayes, the leader of the resistance, stood at the front of a war-torn command center. His face was grim, his eyes tired, but there was a fire in him that couldn't be extinguished. The humans had lost so much. Entire generations had been wiped out by the Zkarn invasion. Yet the fight wasn't over. The general had seen humanity's strength firsthand. He knew that they weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the future of their species. "We can't stop now," he said to his officers, his voice firm but steady. "We're not just defending Earth. We're defending what it means to be human." The room went silent. The officers, hardened by months of battle, nodded in agreement. They were all aware of the stakes. The Zkarn, despite their superior technology and vast numbers, had begun to fear the humans. They were starting to realize that the very qualities they had initially considered weaknesses, human adaptability, ingenuity, and unyielding will, had become their greatest strengths. The tide was turning. It was a slow, painful process, but humanity was fighting back, and they were doing it with the very weapons the Zkarn had once used to dominate them. Human scientists, having reverse-engineered captured alien technology, had started crafting new, improved weapons, energy-based rifles, advanced armor, and high-powered explosives that were capable of piercing the Zkarn's seemingly impenetrable defenses. The resistance was growing more organized and more powerful by the day, and humanity was learning how to use their enemy's own strength against them. In one of the smaller resistance bunkers, a group of young engineers and soldiers were working around the clock to modify a captured Zkarn ship. The ship was damaged, but it still had its weapons and engines intact. They had spent weeks analyzing it, making countless adjustments, and now they were ready to put it to use. "This is our chance," said Emily, a young engineer who had been one of the first to figure out how to integrate human technology with alien tech. "If we can get this ship airborne, we can make a real strike against their command center." Her words were met with a mixture of excitement and fear. The mission was risky. If the humans were discovered, it would mean the end of the entire resistance. But the need to strike back was stronger than the fear of failure. Humanity had reached a point where they couldn't afford to wait for the Zkarn to make their next move. It was time to act. As the engineers finished their modifications, Emily, along with a small team of elite soldiers, climbed aboard the alien ship. The craft hummed to life, its engines roaring as it slowly lifted off the ground. The humans had done it. They had stolen a piece of the Zkarn's power, and now they would use it to strike where it would hurt the most, at the heart of the enemy's command. The ship soared through the sky, dodging incoming fire from alien artillery below. It was a perilous flight, but Emily and her team were determined. They flew straight for the Zkarn mothership, where Ralthor, the alien leader, was overseeing the final stages of the invasion. If they could destroy the mothership, they could cripple the Zkarn's command structure and perhaps even turn the war in humanity's favor. Back on the ground, General Hayes and his forces launched a full-scale attack on the Zkarn's defenses, diverting attention away from Emily's team. They were giving their comrades a fighting chance. As explosions lit up the sky and alien warships clashed with human forces, the resistance made its move. The battle was fierce. Zkarn soldiers were everywhere, fighting to keep their position. But the humans were relentless, and they were learning how to exploit the alien weaknesses. Their tactics were no longer the same. They had adapted. The humans had studied their enemies, and now they were using the Zkarn's own strategies against them. At the same time, Emily's team reached the Zkarn mothership. The ship was enormous, its dark, jagged silhouette cutting through the sky like a looming shadow. Emily and her team docked in a hidden hangar bay, sneaking through the ship's corridors to the control center. They moved swiftly, using alien cloaking technology and human-made disruptors to stay undetected. They knew this was their only chance. Once they were inside, they had to disable the mothership's central control system, which would cut off communications and allow the human forces to make their final push. They reached the control room, and Emily quickly set to work. She tapped into the ship's mainframe, bypassing security protocols and initiating a shutdown sequence. But just as she was about to finish the job, an alarm blared. The Zkarn had detected the intrusion. "Get ready," Emily shouted. "We don't have much time." The room erupted into chaos. The Zkarn forces stormed in, weapons raised. Emily and her team fought back, but they were outnumbered. Yet the human soldiers held their ground. Every shot, every movement was calculated and precise. They were fighting for more than just survival. They were fighting for the future of humanity. Emily finally managed to complete the shutdown sequence. The mothership's systems flickered and shut down. The large ship began to lose power, and the battle around them started to shift in humanity's favor. With their communications cut, the Zkarn struggled to coordinate their forces. The advantage had shifted, even if only slightly. The mission was a success, but it came at a heavy cost. As the team made their way back to their ship, they were ambushed by Zkarn forces. In the ensuing firefight, several members of the team fell. But Emily and the survivors managed to escape, and the ship returned to Earth, carrying with it the promise of victory. Back on Earth, General Hayes received the news of the successful strike on the mothership. It was a small victory, but it was the beginning of something much larger. The Zkarn were not invincible. Humanity had found a way to fight back. And now, the war was far from over. The Resistance had learned a valuable lesson. No matter how powerful the enemy seemed, they could always be defeated. The Zkarn had come looking for weakness, but what they had found instead was a species that refused to be broken. The fight was far from won, but humanity was ready. The true war had only just begun. The events following the strike on the Zkarn mothership had shifted the momentum of the war, but the cost of the victory was steep. Despite their success, the human resistance had suffered heavy losses. The death toll had risen once again, and even as the world began to breathe a sigh of relief, there was no time to mourn. The war was far from over, and the final assault was still ahead. The Zkarn were wounded but not defeated, and they were now more determined than ever to crush humanity's last hope. General Marcus Hayes, weary and battle-worn, stood before the remaining members of the Resistance. The human forces had regrouped, but the Zkarn were still a formidable enemy. Yet in the eyes of his soldiers, there was a spark, an unwavering conviction. They had proven time and time again that they could stand against the alien invaders. The general knew that they were on the verge of something monumental. "We've made it this far, but this next step will determine the fate of humanity," Hayes said, his voice steady but filled with a quiet fire. "The Zkarn are weakening. but they won't stop. We have to strike now. We take their homeworld, we take their power, and we end this once and for all." His words were met with determined nods. The humans had adapted to the battlefield, mastering the alien technology they had scavenged and even using it against their former masters. The resistance was not the same force that had first taken up arms against the invaders. They were better organized, more unified, and now, armed with the knowledge and resources to fight the Zkarn on their own terms. Hayes' plan was risky, but it was their best chance. The Zkarn had a hidden base on a remote moon, a place where their leaders had begun to regroup after the mothership's destruction. If they could infiltrate the base and destroy the Zkarn's command center, they would not only cripple their ability to continue the war, but they would also send a message. Humanity would not be enslaved. As the resistance prepared for the final assault, they gathered all their remaining forces. The plan was simple but dangerous. Infiltrate the moon base, breach its defenses, and take out the heart of the Zkarn's operation. They would need everything they had, and more, to succeed. The countdown to the mission was set. Every soldier knew that they might not make it back, but they didn't hesitate. They were fighting for the future of their species. As the fleet of human ships left Earth's atmosphere, the weight of the task ahead felt heavier than ever. The journey to the moon would take several days, but as they traveled through the void of space, there was a silence that hung in the air. The crew members knew the stakes, and though the fear was palpable, there was also something else, a deep sense of unity. Humanity was no longer a fractured species. They had become a singular force, bonded by the trials they had endured together. This was their last chance. Finally, they reached the moon, a desolate rock orbiting a gas giant. From a distance, the Zkarn base appeared quiet, almost abandoned, but the humans knew better. The enemy was cunning, and they would be waiting. General Hayes and his elite team, including Emily, the engineer who had helped turn the tide with the stolen ship, led the assault. The plan was to land just outside the base's perimeter, infiltrate their defenses, and strike at the heart of the Zkarn command center. The moon's surface was barren, covered with craters and jagged terrain, a hostile environment that would make any military operation difficult. As they descended to the surface, the resistance soldiers donned their combat suits, their faces grim with determination. There was no turning back now. The first wave of soldiers hit the ground hard, using the shadows of the moon's craters for cover. They moved quickly, silently, cutting through the enemy's outer defenses with precise, deadly force. Emily, working with a team of engineers, had helped design stealth devices that allowed them to bypass the Zkarn sensors, and they put them to good use. The enemy didn't know they were there until it was too late. As they advanced deeper into the base, the resistance began to encounter the first signs of Zkarn soldiers. Fierce and powerful, the aliens fought with the intensity of beings who had no idea what it meant to lose. But humanity was no longer the underdog. The humans had learned how to use the aliens' own technology against them, their weapons now far more effective than they had been in the early days of the war. With every Zkarn that fell, the resistance's resolve only strengthened. Emily led a small group of engineers toward the command center, working with a sense of urgency. They had to disable the alien power grid, cut off communication, and cripple the entire base's security system. Time was against them, but their resolve was unwavering. They had done the impossible before. This time, they would do it again. Meanwhile, General Hayes and his team fought their way toward the heart of the base. The sound of gunfire and explosions echoed through the metal corridors. Each step was met with resistance, but the human soldiers were relentless. They were motivated by more than just survival. They were driven by a fierce will to protect everything they held dear. Every fight was a step closer to victory, and with every fallen Zkarn, they were one step closer to taking the fight to the alien homeworld. But just as they neared the central command room, an overwhelming force of Zkarn reinforcements arrived. They had been expecting the attack. The humans found themselves surrounded, outnumbered, and trapped in a final stand against their enemies. It was a brutal clash. The humans fought with everything they had left. Their weapons blazed, and their soldiers pushed forward. But the Zkarn were relentless. They were stronger, faster, and their numbers were overwhelming. The Resistance's once hopeful momentum began to stall. It seemed like all was lost, but then something extraordinary happened. The humans, who had fought so hard to survive, now tapped into the full potential of their hidden strength. The very instinct that had driven them from the start, the will to survive, to protect, and to fight, came alive in them with explosive power. They fought not just for victory, but for a future that belonged to them, for a future that was theirs to build. General Hayes, knowing this was their last chance, rallied his forces. He knew that in moments like these, there was no room for hesitation. "Hold the line," he shouted, his voice carrying over the chaos of battle. "We're not done yet." With those words, the Resistance pushed back. They fought through the overwhelming odds with a savagery the Zkarn hadn't expected. Every soldier, every engineer, every member of the Resistance gave their all. And in the heart of the battle, Emily managed to reach the central control panel, delivering the final blow to the Zkarn's power grid. The base shuddered as its power systems began to fail. Communications were severed, the security systems shut down, and the Zkarn were left in disarray. With their command structure destroyed, the aliens began to falter. The tide of battle shifted once again in humanity's favor. But even as they celebrated their victory on the moon, the war was far from over. The Zkarn were down, but not out. The humans had proven that they were capable of winning against impossible odds. The final assault had been a triumph, but there was still much more to be done. As General Hayes stood among the survivors, looking up at the stars, he knew the fight would continue. But one thing was certain: humanity had proven they were more than capable of winning. The Zkarn had come seeking weakness, but what they found was a species that could never be broken, no matter how fierce the battle or how high the cost. Humanity had survived. And in time, they would show the invaders that Earth was their home, and they would never be defeated. The battle for Earth had reached its peak, and after their victory on the Zkarn moon base, humanity was standing on the precipice of a new dawn. The alien invaders, crippled by the destruction of their command center, were scattered and disorganized. Yet the fight was not over. The final assault was merely the beginning of a new chapter in humanity's struggle for survival. General Marcus Hayes stood before a small gathering of his closest advisors, his face drawn with exhaustion but filled with determination. They had struck a decisive blow, but the war was far from finished. The Zkarn had been dealt a massive blow to their leadership, but the remnants of their military still posed a considerable threat. And worse yet, there was still the matter of the Zkarn homeworld. "We've shown them that we're not just survivors," General Hayes began, his voice calm but filled with intensity. "We've shown them that we're warriors. But the war isn't over until we take the fight to their homeworld. We have to finish what we started. We cannot rest while they still have a chance to regroup. We go to them. Now." The human fleet was battered and bruised, its numbers dwindling, but they had proven time and time again that they could endure, adapt, and push forward when others would have faltered. The battle for Earth had been long and unforgiving, but now it was time for humanity to take the fight to the heart of the Zkarn Empire. The general's resolve was unwavering, and it resonated in the hearts of his people. Across the globe, humanity's resolve had hardened. The Resistance had transformed into a united force, a coalition of the remnants of Earth's military and civilian populations. No longer were they just fighting to survive. They were fighting for their future, for their children, and for the right to remain masters of their own world. The wounds of war had not broken them. They had made them stronger. The final mission was clear. The human fleet would travel to the Zkarn homeworld, deep in the heart of their galaxy. It would be a perilous journey, but the humans were prepared. The stolen alien technology that they had mastered over the course of the war would give them an edge, but they still faced an uphill battle. The Zkarn had long anticipated that humanity would eventually come for them, and they were prepared to defend their homeworld with everything they had. As the fleet set course for the Zkarn homeworld, there was a palpable sense of anticipation. For some, it was the final desperate push for freedom. For others, it was a reckoning, their last opportunity to prove that humanity was capable of standing against the darkest of forces. The humans were not just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for their place in the universe. The journey through space was long, and every day that passed brought new challenges. There were skirmishes with scattered Zkarn forces, counterattacks from alien patrol ships, and the constant threat of ambush. Yet through it all, the human fleet pressed on. They had no choice. There was no turning back. As they neared the Zkarn homeworld, the sheer scale of the enemy's civilization became apparent. The planet was massive, surrounded by an array of formidable defense systems, both in space and on the surface. The humans were outnumbered, but they had learned the value of stealth, surprise, and cunning. The same strategies that had helped them succeed in the past would be their guiding light once again. General Hayes and his officers planned the final assault with meticulous care. They would land in a small, uncharted region of the Zkarn homeworld, far from the heavily fortified cities and military installations. From there, they would infiltrate the planet's central command facility, where the Zkarn's leadership resided. It was the heart of the alien empire, and its fall would mark the end of their invasion of Earth. The battle began just as they expected, violent and unrelenting. The Zkarn had anticipated their arrival, and they fought back with everything they had. Massive ships with advanced weaponry filled the skies, while ground forces descended upon the human soldiers with brutal force. But the humans were ready. They fought back with unparalleled intensity. Every move they made, every step they took, was motivated by the knowledge that the future of humanity depended on their success. In the midst of the chaos, Emily, one of the lead engineers who had helped reverse engineer Zkarn technology, played a crucial role. She had been working tirelessly to disable the enemy's weapon systems and communications. As she infiltrated the heart of the enemy's operations, she triggered a series of explosions that took out a large portion of their defense grid. It was a game changer. The humans now had a chance to break through the defenses. As the final push toward the Zkarn command center commenced, General Hayes and his forces stormed through the gates of the command facility. Inside, they faced a terrifying force. Ralthor, the supreme commander of the Zkarn, was waiting for them. The alien leader had known that this moment would come, and he had prepared himself for a final stand. He was a towering figure, clad in black armor, his eyes glowing with an unsettling intensity. "You think you've won." Ralthor's voice echoed through the command center. "You are nothing but ants to us. You will fall, just like the others." But General Hayes, standing before the alien leader, was resolute. "We've been fighting for this moment since the day you first stepped onto our planet. We're not your prey. We are humanity, and we will not be defeated." The two forces clashed in the heart of the enemy's stronghold. Ralthor was an imposing foe, his strength and agility unmatched. But the humans fought with a fury born of desperation, of love for their home, their families, and their very existence. The battle was fierce, each side pushing to its limits. In the midst of the fight, Emily managed to access the central core of the Zkarn command facility, and with one final decisive blow, she initiated a self-destruct sequence. The entire facility began to tremble as explosions rippled through the structure. Ralthor roared in fury, but it was too late. The heart of the Zkarn Empire was crumbling around them. As the facility began to collapse, General Hayes and his team made their final escape. They barely managed to board their ships before the entire Zkarn command center was obliterated, taking with it the last remnants of the alien leadership. Ralthor's vision of conquering humanity had been shattered. The human fleet, battered but victorious, made its way back to Earth. The Zkarn had been defeated. The invasion had come to an end. Humanity had not only survived, they had triumphed. They had proven that no matter the odds, No matter how dark the enemy, they would always fight back. They would never be broken. As Earth's survivors watched the stars from their home once more, they knew the war was over. They had stood tall in the face of overwhelming odds and emerged victorious. The alien forces that had threatened their world had been vanquished, and Earth was free. The fight had been long, brutal, and filled with sacrifice. But in the end, humanity had done what they had always done best. They adapted, they fought, and they overcame. The future was theirs to shape, and nothing, not even the stars themselves, could take that from them.